to the cloud. So Roger and I had this really interesting experience this past summer. It doesn't seem like it was that long ago, and I thought it'd be interesting to share with the group. And well, actually, it was Roger's idea to share it with the group, and I think it's great. So, Roger, it's all yours.
Well, this summer I made the mistake of inviting DC up to a river cottage in Connecticut, and I have to report something disappointing. He took more pictures of birds while he was with me than he did of anything railroad related. So I just had to mention that part of it. Well, while on his, when he let me know he was on his way, we're in an internet hole because the river cottage that we're on is a river valley, and we're 20 feet away from the water normally. And I was looking up a railroad that was nearby where the river cottage is, that was first began operation in 1873. And this was a friend of mine telling me about it. And I'm like, why haven't I known about this before? Now he didn't know what year the railroad was built. Well, I went to the library and found it out. But at the library, I also found out an archaeological site that the state of Connecticut calls a preserve now. And they had found an 1850s turntable and roundhouse there. Okay. Well, needless to say, having been down to New London a couple of times, I had never seen any evidence of that whatsoever. But it was down by, oh Lord, DC. What was that fort called?
Fort Trumbull.
Fort Trumbull. It was down by Fort Trumbull, which began as the defensive system during the War of Independence. Well, actually, I think even before then, if we read that correctly, for the River Thames in the state of Connecticut in New London. And it was the fort on the west side of the river, and Fort Griswold was on the other side of the river. And we could get into that as a story on its own. But they said it was by Fort Trumbull on the west side of the Thames River there in New London. And DC and I went and visited the fort. We even found out that the fort itself, according to how they classify United States forts, was what was that, a phase 3?
Yeah, third system
fort, which means they gave that fort its final modifications in the 1850s, and it was a Civil War fort manned by, I believe, local state militia. And nonetheless, that we enjoyed that, and we went looking for the round table based upon the old maps that we found. Am I sharing my screen? Let me share my screen. I've got the book here. You have got it?
Nope.
Not yet.
All right, let me attempt it again. What's going on here? Window? Try it this way. Here we go. All right.
There.
Am I up and running here?
Yes.
Excellent. Now, Here we go.
Well, the thing is that what I'm seeing is
Us.
us, not necessarily what you're trying to share.
Right. You got the book now in the picture?
It's in front of your face, yes.
It's in front of my face. Yes, that is correct.
Everybody else, to be able to see it better,
Okay.
everybody else needs to be quiet and Roger say something.
Yeah.
And then the screen will focus on Roger.
Yeah. Okay. Here we go now. All right. I'll try to put it where you can see my face and the book. When the whistle blows, it's from the state of Connecticut. DC and I found a copy of it. There's also a downloadable copy of this document that I think if you get literally, actually, I can send you that link later on in the chat. Remind me if I don't do that. Yeah. So we go looking for it, and it says it's near a construction site. All right. And DC and I, very close by, the approximate location, find the construction site. That's, of course, sealed off. But we didn't read closely enough because they were actually in the book, they were talking about the construction site being where the round table was. Now, in the book, they provided pictures. Now, mind you, DC and I are going off the old maps. We had a Civil War map, we had an 1870 map, and we were looking at those closely and trying to match them up to the modern terrain. And we finally got very, very close to this, to it on a very rocky, bouldery hill. And when I say hill, it was merely a mound coming off of the river area, very close to the tracks. Well, I start looking closer at the book. We were close there. DC, feel free to jump in if there's anything that you're like, oh, don't forget this, you know.
I think, can you try stopping the screen sharing at this point?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Let me do that. Okay. And as a result, we start walking towards this parking lot. And in the book, they have pictures. The pictures are from the early 2000s. And so we're looking around. And finally, both DC and I brains finally started to look at the photographs and say, let's try to match these photographs with what we're seeing here. So we're both looking at the books we purchased. We're both looking at the exact same photograph. We start identifying buildings that are in the photograph. Then DC is looking at what's up front where they actually took the picture, the electrical, what are those called, DC? The electrical over
It's part of the catenary system.
Yeah, there we go. And we're looking at that, and we were in the wrong place, and we said, well, this picture doesn't look like that. And so we decide, well, let's walk further this way, because according to the map, that looks like it's closer to where this site is. We keep going, and we finally find the exact same, what is it called again? The cantering system?
The catenary, that actually was the tower.
The tower.
Yeah.
It's an exact match to the picture. The buildings in the back are an exact match. We begin to angle ourselves. There is a mesh steel fence in front of us, blocking us off from where the rails are. And we're looking over that, hoping to see where the archaeological site is. Well, the problem is it's gone.
Hmm.
We were standing on it in the parking lot. We got it, the footage and everything. We found a geographical survey in the book. We got it spot on. We were right there, right on top of it, on a parking lot. So effectively, the state of Connecticut archived it, came up with this book, recorded it, did the archaeological survey, and then said, "Great, you paid for the parking lot, go." And another piece of history moves on.
Mm.
But being DC found it, it was confirmed. We were at the correct angle. We were right there. We could, and the parking lot, needless to say, extended down to where the engine house would have been. And it was a 3-door engine house, according to the description. And when you look at where the site is, it's right next to the tracks. And what was also neat about it, I cannot remember the first name that the line that was used, but the second name, which started in 1864, is called the shoreline.
Hmm.
And gentlemen, I have good news. That section between New Haven and New London is still called the shoreline section. So they kindly, left the name in place to connect it with its historical past. And if I'm opening up the book now. Yeah, I think, where's the shoreline here? Oh, the other thing is they list in this book is they listed several locomotives from the 1850s and early 1860s that went up and down that line. There, most of them, six of them are Rogers, K and G. 3 of them are simply Rogers, and one of them was one I'd never heard, a Swinburne. Swinburne. Right. So that was neat. And we had to find the area after we went to the museum. DC and I spent, what was it? Do you think about 2 hours looking for it, DC, and finally finding it?
It was, well, we spent the better part of the day.
Yeah. Yeah.
The
we
museum
breezed
was
right through lunch without even thinking about it. Without even thinking about it. We were hot on the trail, and it was just, it was wonderful. We had a good time. Yes, I can tell you there was just a little bit of disappointment when we understood the parking lot was what we came to see. But nonetheless,
we figured we were standing right on the turntable based on the picture and the distance from the rails. We had to be standing, maybe not square in the center pivot, but we were on that turntable.
Right. No doubt about it. And here, I'm going to share my screen again real quick. Remind me to take it off in case I...
Well, you can just hold that up, I think. Is that another picture from the book?
There we go. Well, actually, I'm going to try to get a close-up on the archaeological.
All I see is my face.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It's probably better that you, don't share.
Stop, yes, don't share, but just put the book up.
All right, let me stop sharing. All right, whoops, there we go. Back over here to the archaeological site map that we were using. And that's from the state of Connecticut. And it was a lovely afternoon. We had a ball. It was wonderful to be there with a fellow modeler, historian, and friend searching for this, and both equally and thoroughly engaged in the pursuit.
The museum was pretty good too, because you know, there were like 3 different forts built, you know, and the third one system fort was during the Civil War. They had some Dahlgren guns, I think, there, as well as you know, the fort. You know, it was old because some parts of it we couldn't go in to see because the ceiling was coming in down.
Oh,
But it looked like they had some great models of actually like different wagons, ambulance wagons and artillery and stuff in there. You could look through the window and see it, but we can no longer go into the building to see it. But it was an original fort too, Civil War.
It
You know, probably in relatively good condition.
Oh yeah.
A friend of mine's been in the one in Savannah. I cannot think of what that fort is called right now.
Lansky.
Yeah, yeah. And oh, that thing, I was told it's falling apart.
Yeah, it's sort of this story sort of reminds me of the one time I was trying to look for the main line of the Greenwich and Johnsonville, between Greenwich and Johnsonville. And the thing is, coming out of Greenwich, you can see where the abutments for the bridge, you know, used to be. And then you can sort of, you can see where the roadbed goes into the road. And then when I went to, you know, I'm assuming it went to the other side, and I'm like, wait, I don't see it coming out the other side. So I'm, you know, traveling down the road, you know, trying to see, you know, see if I could pick back up where the roadbed was. And then I got to, I forgot exactly the name of the town and all that, but there was a town that's in between them two, and I come up and I see where the how the town is set up. And I'm on this road, and I noticed that there's this building that, you know, just screams like a milk terminal and all that, where they would bring all the milk in, and it's like, so, oh, that's that, and it's parallel to the road that I'm on, but it's like nowhere. There's like a crossroad, and all the other buildings are on that road, or they're on that road and all that. And then I just happened to realize, like, wait a minute, the road I've been on for a back road, awful flat and very wide curves and all that. And that's when I sort of realized that, wait a minute, I'm actually driving on the former roadbed.
Yeah. You know, I ran into something similar. I went to the Bristow battlefield and walked down. I was hoping to see the rails. Well, when I'm on my way down there, there's this tree line. And I get up to the tree line, and there's a small red sign there that says roadbed.
Mhm.
And I mentioned that to Joel. I was talking with Joel Sammons, and I mentioned that to Joel. And Joel said, well, the problem is the Southern Railroad at one point straightened out the Orange and Alexandria line. And so what I was looking at was original roadbed, and the tracks on the other side were unfortunately a correction of the meandering, the old meandering Orange and Alexandria.
Wow.
Yeah.
Industrial always will get straighter. One of these days, the Mississippi will only be a mile long. Sorry, Mark Twain, I just paraphrased.
Got it.
But
Later on, what I'll try to do is pull together that trip that I made, because what I did was starting in, actually starting a little lower. I tripped across the Virginia Central Railroad tunnel there in Rockfish Gap in Virginia, heading towards Richmond. And I didn't do a tour of that, but I went down to the east side of it, which is easier access. The other access is a 2.5 mile walk on the west side. But after that, I started at Orange, and then tried to follow the Orange and Alexandria stations. And I got through. I skipped Culpeper, but I went to Catlets. I found out that the Warrington Y is still a Y. It's not a switching. It's, well, I mean, a Y is a switching system, but they didn't try to modernize. Well, I don't think they played too much with the roadbed there. They just left it a Y and didn't try to update any of the line there necessarily, except of course with new rail or whatever. And then I went up to Kettle Run, and then Bristow Station, and from Bristow Station on to Manassas. On my way back, I started at Thoroughfare Gap and went west on the Manassas Gap Railroad on the old 55 highway, and found out that a lot of the, well, not a lot of their stations, but that's original roadbed still through the Manassas Gap area. And Piedmont, which is now, I think, Delphininia, which is where Jackson got onto the trains to head to the First Battle of Manassas. Those are the same buildings still there next to the track. It's glorious. And there's another one further down the line that has the same situation. So I'll try to put something together for down the line for that, because that was really neat to see the old areas. And also I found out something at Thoroughfare Gap. There's an axis on the west side, an access road on the west side of Thoroughfare Gap that leads to the geographical area of a former station there, which I think was a siding. And DC, remember when Tom suggested the siding on the other side of my layout?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. I may frickin' have proof that it's actually there, because I found a map from August of '62 that shows a station on that side of the, coming around the north face of Thoroughfare Gap. So, and I'll try to bring that all together for later on.
the problem with so many Civil War maps is they don't show the sidings. You need a quartermaster map usually to pick up the sidings. And the sidings, I find when you look at photographs, change regularly. You know, lots of construction crews with U.S. Military Railroad. And they pick stuff up and lay it down and move it. And of course, the switch was just put the bridles on and put the lever in. The other thing you'll find interesting is you can't use photographs looking for levers, because I think in a lot of cases, the levers were not left in place.
That's absolutely correct. There is a picture out there that has like about 8 levers at a depot sitting together.
And the reason for that was Mr. Morgan's activities, probably, along the Shenandoah and Orange and Alexandria. The U.S. military railroad operated in pretty much a hostile environment throughout there, which was the last part of Sangster Station. I just put in the New York Cavalry coming out to go out on patrol, which I mean the Orange and Alexandria to Brandy Station occupied 5,000 defensive forces were required. So it was a real manpower. The U.S. military railroad probably had similar arrangements wherever they were throughout the South when they were occupying and running the railroads. I know they did have clear standards for installing sidings, and the interesting note is that these sidings were generally 8 cars, were said to be to accommodate a minimum of 8 cars.
Wow.
And I have a feeling that in a lot of the support trains, they were operating convoys, but the trains were very short because the track was very bad. or they were trying to minimize losses if there was an attack on the rails. So, you know, they had hundreds of locomotives, but they needed all of the supplies. So I think there's a little bit of that compromise on that. So that was interesting. I'm going to go see if I can find a secondary reference to the 8-car siding. And that was on, I think, the Charleston and Savannah and the Western and Atlantic, in the sections that were being operated in support of
Nope, I think we might have lost him.
Sherman.
Oh, he's back, I think.
You're back, Joel.
Yeah, okay. I didn't go anywhere. I didn't touch anything.
You were talking, and all of a sudden you just went.
Okay, that's somewhere in the land of Zoom, because I saw nothing on here. I was saying the U.S. military railroad with 8-car sidings in occupied territory seemed to be a pretty standard instruction that was sent out. I found that in McCallum's instructions in support of Sherman. So that would indicate the trains in occupied territory were running about 8 cars plus a loco. And
now, what size cars are we talking about? Because passenger cars are definitely longer than freight cars. So I'm assuming.
I don't think they are operating very many passenger cars. A passenger car to the U.S. military railroad is a boxcar with the door open. And maybe a hole knocked in the side, you know, to improve the breeze, and the troops sitting on top.
And the photographic evidence shows that maybe there was one passenger car in a group of flat cars and box cars and things of that nature when it was a construction train, or they were pulling the train off of from having been pushed off the rails by Mosby or somebody like that.
I believe there's a photograph of City Point, and I believe of all things, there's a Pennsylvania Railroad passenger car in the picture.
2 cars. It's not City Point. It's Alexandria, and there is a picture of 2 Pennsylvania cars, and they were in fact borrowed from the Pennsylvania. The shot of Alexandria has, I think, 5 cars one or two of which are marked hospital cars. And I'm wondering if those had been modified along with the everybody has to have one boxcar that has hospital on the door. So I know that was included in the first set of microtrain Civil War cars. They had the hospital car. So there, I mean, they had passenger cars, but they really did not operate a passenger service.
Yeah.
Correct.
So we're talking cars that are 25 or 30 foot long.
Roughly 28 over coupler, over buffer.
Yeah.
Now, in that same shot, and I'll pull that up in a couple of weeks, there is this really long stock car that's almost the size of a passenger car sitting in the yard at Alexandria. It's kind of fun. I was looking, the reason I was looking, I just finished looking at a lot of stuff because I added a couple of scenes to the T-track layout. I'll send pictures next week because I just finished boxing everything up and getting it ready to load in the truck. I had to get everything kind of padded in for that. Anybody going to NMRA?
No.
No, I am not.
Oh, you should. It's great. It's in Dallas. It'll be 108.
Yeah.
It'll keep you warm. If you've been cold lately, come on down. The Gaylord has a water park. I think I'll enjoy a little of that at night.
Hey, Charlie, I was wondering, do you have any updates on preparing us for October?
No, I'll try to put one together. I've been actually pretty busy, either keeping the grandkids or working on the railroad. I hadn't put anything. Well, I had a guest visit though a couple of weeks ago. So Roger came by, and I don't know if he's already told you, but he's checked things out and crawling underneath the layout, taking pictures and whatnot while Ginger and I went to church. But he's got the scoop on it right now.
Yeah, his layout looks, okay. When I step up there into this beautiful mecca of a museum class layout, it's just something else. It really is.
Well, I was hoping to be finished. It's going to be close, but there's still another decade of detailing. To have something like Bernie's layout or whatever. But
Well, I did pulled up the calculator, and if they're 20 foot length cars, and there's 8 of them, that's has a minimum of 224 feet. Then of course you have to have the
Which is, yeah. I know at City Point, which was operated, the sidings are 800 to 900 feet because that's marked on the maps. But those in that case, you have the engineered drawn maps or from the archives. But so much of this stuff, the documentation on the occupied railroads is far less than the documentation on the Virginia railroads in the archives. It was all directly in support of operations and was all pulling things together that were available locally. Yeah, so that's interesting if anybody wants to try that.
I don't remember exactly, but in reading about the Nashville and Chattanooga Railroad, I mean, during the occupation, I'm thinking I read that they had a siding every 1 to 2 miles. And I never read the 8-car thing, but they had a sighting almost every mile.
Yeah, they were talking about a minimum of 8 car.
Yeah.
You know, in other words, it could have been longer, but that would allow you to saw by, you know, maybe a 10-car train.
Yeah.
I'd have to work the saw by rules. I really don't do too many saw bys anymore. But that was just an interesting tidbit that I wandered into in rereading some of the reports in the archives. Was that, and I would agree, there's probably a lot of very, very short sightings. But if you're putting them every mile, then you probably have shorter sightings. A lot of track. You know.
Now, when it says for an 8-car sighting, does that include the locomotive or just the cars?
It includes the locomotive, and if they had a non-revenue car, and I know from the pictures of Nashville, there was a pile of non-revenue cars there at the terminal. You know, the little conductor, the office cars. I don't know whether they were conductors' cars or office cars out there. In looking at the car reports, I changed some of my opinion. I thought for a lot of times I was seeing conductor cars, but they're in fact office cars or kitchen cars. Because in the car reports, they have all these diverted box cars. And the notes on the right, it has how many have been taken out of operational service, not revenue. Obviously, for that, it's not a revenue generating entity. But that's just kind of, it was just one of those little kind of funny things. I really have sympathy when you go looking for things and find has been entombed. You know? The city of Alexandria, thorough archaeology on the U.S. military railroad terminal, and it's documented in the city records, all the historical reports and photographs. And that's all being done, you know, right before they do construction. But at least it's documented, you know. And they entomb as much as they can. The Orange and Alexandria Canal that you see the pictures of occasionally in Alexandria along the wharf. They did archaeology on it, literally entombed it, but they packed it in sand so it was left in situ. It's still there. It's packed in sand underneath the modern construction. So it was preserved, but you can't. They just have the last lock on the river is exposed where you can. It's on the river walk. You can go look at it, see how wide it was and how deep it was. That's the original lock. It isn't a working lock or anything like that, but the stones are the original river lock, which is now about 40 feet from the river.
Does anybody have anything else they'd like to share, to bring up or ask about? Or
Well, sort of on the canal front, I used to live in Cohoes, New York, which they still have a bunch of intact and some, you know, partially intact canal locks that are from the second iteration of the Erie Canal. And there's also there is a small section that has part of the original canal. Also is, you know, you can see some of those parts and all that, because the original canal, after it was bypassed, was turned into a power canal for all the different mills in the area. And one of the interesting thing is that there's one set of buildings that the basement is a lock. And they when they wound up refurbishing the whole area and all that, they actually the lock is still covered, but they got a big, huge like telescope that goes down into it, and they have it lit up so you can actually see it from street level. And then where I was living, there was actually lock 15, which was all the stonework was there, but there was no wood left, but all the original stonework was still there. So if anyone is interested in seeing how locks used to be before the Civil War. But one project that I'm in the process of trying to figure out how to do is take this little it's a lifelike, I guess they call it a teapot. It was something that I wound up buying, and it was in the lot itself, but I guess this is it's OO, not HO. But since I'm planning on doing broad gauge, I decided to name this the experiment and experiment on widen the gauge on it. Because if you look at on how the wheels are, it's basic, since it's OO, but it runs on HO scale track, it's actually a narrow gauge engine. But the thing is that the cylinders are approximately where a 6-foot gauge locomotive would be in HO scale. So as I said, it came with a lot and all that. And so if it doesn't work, hence why I'm calling it the experiment. Also planning on getting rid of all the rivet detail on the cabin, etc., and all that. As you can see, there are some things that are just not right about it. That smokestack is definitely not across the headlight, in line with the cylinders. But first, I'm gonna widen the gauge first, and then slowly make it look right if I did get it working correctly.
Cool.
Yeah, cool project.
Yes. Be even cooler if I can get it to work.
For sure.
So I picked up a 3D printer a few months ago, and I've been working with it. And this is the tub for a Densmore car, like a water car or oil, or one of the early oil cars. So that really, that 3D printer really does a good job on the conical shape. Did not want to have to deal with putting all those boards together, so that was really nice.
So are you going to be making some for your layout then?
Yeah, that's the plan. A lot of water cars. So since I modeled the Santa Fe, they had to haul water in just to run the engines in places.
Did they so the water cars were used to bring water to the stations? Is that,
Yeah.
okay.
How far away did they have to get the water, Phil?
Let's see. I would have to look it up in terms of distance, but I would say maybe about 50 miles in the area I'm modeling.
Okay. Is that New Mexico?
Actually, Eastern California in the Mojave Desert.
Okay.
So, yeah, I know they ran it at least like 5 stations. The spring was somewhere to the west at the top of the grade, and they ran it for like 5 stations down the grade. So,
Yeah,
So
if you
are
have-
you scratch building the frames, or how are you doing that?
those actually are 3D printed as well, on the frames for the flat cars. So I have a, pretty good method for doing those. So,
How many cars do you think you're gonna end up making like that?
I'm gonna start with 6, but I would probably plan on building at least 20 to actually operate my layout.
All in a single like unit train?
2-unit trains, a full and an empty.
Oh, okay.
So
Would
Why do
you-
you,
Go ahead, sorry.
no, you.
I was just gonna ask you, are you gonna have, let's say you have 20 cars, 10 full, 10 empty. Are they gonna have the same numbers for each of the 10? Or are you gonna just have like 20 different numbers?
20 different numbers.
Okay.
Why do you think water tanks were conical? You know, it's interesting that I would say the southern water tanks before the war, most were cylindrical, or maybe all were cylindrical. I think there's some rectangular tanks on the W&A. But I think when the infrastructure was torn up a little bit, it seemed that the Yankees always came back with a tapered water tank. And I mean, it's interesting that on the cars, they were tapered as well, those tubs.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not sure.
I believe the reason why they're conical, I could be wrong on this, but if I remember correctly, it's sort of like when they building buildings and all that. The walls would be thicker at the bottom, and it would go to the top. And I think it's the same, probably the same control of the physics of because I think if you look at a water tank, there's also more bandings on the bottom because there's more weight to be involved in all that. So that's my assumption why they were conical.
But
Maybe they came from barrels.
well, they were cylindrical. Like, I mean, the original water towers in the South, but when they got replaced after they were torn up, and it's interesting that for the most part, Nashville and Memphis and Huntsville, the infrastructure, was basically unharmed. They just kind of the railroads changed hands, and it wasn't until Sherman at Atlanta that he really messed things up. But the water towers, those were targets, and some bridges were obviously targets. But it's interesting why they came back with the conical water tower.
I guess you could build them from an inferior cut of lumber if you have one end that can be smaller, right? So.
Yep. But
Another.
Oh.
I would have to say another thing is maybe the ones that are conical might have been
And there's center of gravity to think about on the train cars too, but I've seen cylindrical ones on train cars, so.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking it's like maybe it was the technology or the evolution of technology, but it's one of those things that now that I'm thinking about it, I think the cylindrical was possibly was used later also. So that shot my idea down.
You would find the U.S. military railroads water tanks are all, or for the most part, 2-tank, very standard, and were replaced frequently. Because they were a target. The bridge, the Orange and Alexandria's water tanks were not located at stations. They were located at water stations usually on branches, on water courses. So there you I have about 5, 6 bridge shots, different bridges with twin water tanks on them, which were all built in the war, because every one of those bridges was rebuilt several times.
Yeah.
Great shot of Bristow Station with the train with the tracks burning and the water tanks, the underpinnings catching fire, not the tanks, but when the bridge goes underneath it, it all falls down. So they were all pretty stock, and they were a pretty standard size, and that size you could almost pre-make and put on a flat car. And the carpentry shops were, the big wood shops were all back in Alexandria.
Yeah.
So that may be more of it, Charles, than anything else. It was just, the military was making them, and we have a design, and we're going to do that.
Well, Phil was saying that the 3D printer is an excellent way to make the conical tank. And for those of us who have made them plank by plank, conical, it's a bear. I mean, you got a face angle. I mean, I cut it out, I think 1/32 strip stock. And so you have a face angle, but then you got the taper angle. And so actually made a jig out of tool steel, and that I could clamp each of these little staves in there and cut that double bevel, flip it over and cut the other side. So it'll make you go blind for sure doing it.
Well, I
It
think
looked beautiful though, Charlie.
well, I would assume that they would have made jigs for the prototype, because it's mass production. So usually that's what jigs are usually used for. So
That's kind of what I was more thinking about than anything else. It was a standard, and the construction crews were, I think, all of the cores of the construction crews where the U.S. Military Railroad was rebuilding infrastructure were all trained out of Alexandria, or their crew chiefs. So they would have, I think, just followed I got a set of plans and we're just going to do it.
yeah.
Like the bridges, Joel, do you think they might have been prefabbed in Alexandria and then trained on down?
Yes, because the bridge parts are pre-cut in Alexandria, not the help photographs of the sections. That one I don't think we have, but the basic bridge components for reconstructing the bridges, you find references to them being pre-cut and loaded and brought out. And since the water tanks are a component, I would kind of assume that. And when you look in Alexandria at the size of the wood shops, that's a huge complex. I just found another shot.
Kind of like an erector set, but made from wood.
Lincoln Logs.
That they hired thousands of carpenters in the war. I mean, when I'm looking at McCollum's reports, I mean, he had a huge number of carpenters. You have shots of the carpenters set up all next to each other making parts. And so I'm certain they had some reasonable tolerance. Remember, framing carpenters have to get to the right job site. Finished carpenters have to be 1/64, But the wood was all being made fairly stock lengths in that, so you could put together the assemblage, I think. And that is part of what that's all the technology that's emerging. And then it got hyper reinforced on the Transcontinental Railroad. I mean, figure most of the really good folks ended up there doing, on some other railroads doing construction. It was a common base for engineering workforces. And probably the first where it ran around and kind of provided a stamp on different things. Because you're quite correct. Water tanks, well, I got to go back and look. The Fairbank Marsh standard water tanks, the wooden ones, 50,000, where they had the graduated sides. I got to go back and look at that.
Usually when I think Fairbanks, is scales.
Well, yes, yeah, it is. But Fairbanks Morris also made coal towers and other big components.
Yeah, they weren't a one trick pony, but that's from what I understand, that's how they got their start with scales, and then they wound up branching out to different things. And the scales at the hay barn in Alexandria used by the railroad were Fairbanks Morris car scales, wagon scales and car scales, because they weighed your wagon coming in and all that when they were buying hay. Did they also make windmills?
I have a talk I'm putting together on windmills. If anybody's interested, in the 1850s. If anybody's interested, I could do that at a future one. Because I was surprised at, when Roger was over, I had just found in a Wild or Woad sketch of Bristow Station, there was a tower. When I looked on the map, it said windmill. And I went and looked and found the type windmill that was located there. It's slightly different. The earlier ones and the company that made them made the kind that I was raised with out in New Mexico, putting water in your stock tanks. But the first ones had a kind of more of the spinner was on the tail. It was kind of interesting. Now I realized I'd seen many shots of windmills drawn in sketches of the battlefield. And I was thinking originally they may have been signal stations and that. They were in fact actually windmills for water. I mean, windmill technology, of course, being the latest thing in the 1400s.
That could be an interesting topic with the photos.
Yeah, because I found the ones like the size that the Union Pacific was using, those giant ones out in the West. They made those too. There's scaling. Matter of fact, I found one that is out in West Texas at a museum that's still operating, that they have rebuilt and keep running. So I really want to go see that.
Yeah, windmills. From what I've seen, windmills are they're very simple to put. Yeah, very simple to put together, and also very simple to maintain. And the interesting thing is there's also different ways to quote get the power from the blades down to the wherever the pump is. I remember seeing one where it was all it was you had the blades, and then the shaft went through, and it was a crankshaft. And it would go up and basically go up and down, and then you would have a normal like hand pump, but they took the hand out, or the hand portion of it, and connected to the rod. And the thing is, since the rod and the pump and the cylinder can rotate freely, so it just wherever the blades were pointing, that's where the cylinder was inside the cylinder. And then I think the more later ones, they had like a gearbox, and then, you know, the shaft would, you know, spin. But I think that wound up, you know, the windmill would be slightly askew because of the rotating shaft. But there's a, I would say there's a lot of technology that probably could be modeled if we realized it was back, you know, when it was back then. There's a website. It's, well, the thing is that they own both domains, but it's either Low Tech magazine or No Tech magazine, and they show some of the stuff that they've, you know, the technology that was like used in Roman times and all that, and how it could be used in modern times. One was there was a, oh, what was it? It was power line, I think, in the 1800s and all that. But the thing is that they weren't electric; they were mechanical. So you basically had this mill that had all these pulleys that went to different parts of the specific town. Then there was also, before that, they were showing on how a water wheel with a lot of levers, very, very inefficient, but a lot of levers that would go up to, be able to go up to a mine and all that, and then be able to pump the water out of the mine. So you didn't have to have the power at the location of what you were using it for. And I haven't seen it. I haven't really looked at that site in a while and all that. And the last time I was on there, I think they said they had it set up where it was actually the servers were connected to a solar power plant.
That's like the tour.
Any other updates?
So,
I'll keep it open as long as people want to still discuss stuff, but
Well, one question I do have with the manufacturing at Alexandria, was there stuff? I would assume there was stuff that was steam powered, but also what about hand powered tools and stuff like that?
most of the stuff is in the carpentry shops, and that's those really big man powered planes. And your saws. They're, I mean, they have some mechanical things, but I was watching in a lot of anything that they wanted, like at a rolling mill, that would go out of town. That wasn't really done there. However, they were really good at straightening rails using screw jacks. You know, you have pictures of all those rails bent like that. You know, that was a couple of guys in a screw jack in about 10 minutes to unbend it. So, each one of those bends, so there was a lot of very manual effort in I think in the wood shops. The pictures, which are the guys making the frame for Halp's blanket boats. There was like 40 guys out there planing wood. You know, it wasn't like technology, it was just throw another crew on it. So I can pull up, I'll post on the site a couple of the shots that I just found. The Getty Museum, by the way, just put a whole bunch of photographs up from Andrew Russell's book. And this is a different copy of the book than the one that's in the Smithsonian. And the quality of some of the pictures is much better than the TIFF copies at the Library of Congress. So I was surprised. Sorry.
Because I have the book you were talking about.
Yes, and if you go to the Getty and you go to their photo collections and you do silver nitrate prints, I'm talking to DC. I'm certain reasonably know those things. They have a book that they have digitalized. Andrew Russell. It's another copy of his photographs. He made several books, and he handed them out to people who he wanted to work for, or he was working for. He was just one of those showing, I'm a good technical photographer. And it's one of the shots that really impressed me was one of the shots from the top of the Alexandria Roundhouse, going out towards West End, towards my house in Alexandria. And there was a smudgy train. It is clear in the photograph, it was actually a passenger train.
Whoa.
And the copy in the archives, it looks like that, how you have the little solarization where the photo kind of dodged right there and it didn't come into focus. So the train looks like it's a moving blur. And this one, it's much clearer as to what it is. I mean, I knew it's probably a hospital train, not a passenger train.
Joel, I'll confirm those Getty. I'll confirm the Getty Museum copies. When you told me about that when I was up there on last Saturday, I went back and looked for those, and you're right, they're better. And you can get a better zoom in feature that they have there than the LOC. So that was very impressive. I was glad to get a hold of that. So thanks for that tip.
Yeah, the amount of information that's being digitalized is just phenomenal. It's like collections I'd looked at before. I have to go back because more stuff is getting uploaded.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of sources now, and those that had another shot of it had the only shot I've ever seen of the wood collection in Alexandria. I sort of knew where it was from a map, but I'd never seen a photo of it. And it has a shot of it. They have a huge amount of pre-cut wood stacked up underneath a couple of trees in between two tracks and a siding. And it's just outside of the wood palisade. And you have the roundhouse in the background. Never seen that photograph before. And it was really interesting to find, so there's a scene I'm going to model now.
Yeah.
A question about the sightings earlier. There was a mention that they didn't really have the switch stands, if I remember correctly.
Switch stands were usually carried by the crews in bad boy country.
So they would, so if there's no stands on there, they would just be the line straight?
They would be aligned straight and spiked, or probably pinned straight. And when you needed the switch, the brakeman would hop off and insert it. The linkage is not that complicated, and then turn it. But you go look, even at City Point, you'll see sidings and there's no switch. there's no switch mechanism on it, siding sitting there, and their cars on the siding, so you know it's working. So they obviously, that was just one of those things they moved her, you know, maybe it's like a different concept. I'd love to find somebody wrote something about it. I have not found anything yet. I haven't found that elusive guy that actually was doing that work and wrote a diary.
Yeah. Yeah, because at that point it was still mostly stub switches, correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
So definitely you would definitely would have, I would assume you would definitely have to have some kind of leverage.
Yes, it does. And Roger mentioned, you know, there are pictures of the switch mechanisms lined up at stations, you know, ready to go on a car to go out. So that was just something they carried if they were going to be operating a siding.
It'd be great to see a picture of one. You know, whether it be a lithograph or a photo.
You know, I have pictures of the switch stands missing and pictures of the switches with switch stands in. So,
As we're talking about this, my mind's going, well, how would you throw the bars for the stub turnout? You know, throw the rails for the stub turnout. And would you have some kind of ratchet mechanism that was buried between ties, or what?
It's a bar, and it goes on top, and it's a lever, and you pull it. Yeah, I have to go look at some of the remaining stub switches because I'm all tied up with Fast Track's how to model a stub switch into my head. So yeah, the mechanisms are probably in your book, one of the books you digitalized, you know, with the railroad equipment. But I'm just saying, I would imagine in peacetime they're kind of there. It's that the railroads were operating in hostile territory, and they were trying to minimize them moving south.
Well, the other more practical issue, leave a switch stand out there so Mosby can come by and put the train where he wants it. Yeah. You got to take that stuff up so that can't be easily manipulated.
It's the places I've seen them mostly missing are in what remember 5,000 troops, approximately 5,000 troops were tied up protecting the Orange and Alexandria through the winter quarters when Meade was staying at Brandy Station. Winter of 1863, 1864, before Grant came in. The winter of 63, 64. And the Sangster Station, which was the original T-track module, I finished it. I've done all three, and I've got the blockhouse there and that, and found a good article written about what had happened at the blockhouse recently from Mosby coming by. So it's just one of those things. I kind of was going there and I said, yeah, that would kind of make sense. You would not leave expensive hardware. I mean,
exactly.
They tore up rails regularly. And I mean, the only source of rails for the South was borrow them from the North.
That's true.
In Lee's last attack towards the Battle of Bristow Station, he took a lot of rails with him when he that was the one thing that sort of happened. A bunch of rail disappeared from the Orange and Alexandria line. So I guess the quartermaster had said, you know, if you find any of this kind of long metal stuff laying around, why don't you maybe put it on a wagon and send it to Richmond? We might need it, you know, that kind of stuff. That's like the big pile of rails in Alexandria is the Manassas Gap Railroad that wasn't in service. They just took all the US took the rails and That's that big stack of rails sitting in Alexandria on either side of the track. Mostly came off the Manassas Gap from the valley, not, further out.
What was the average length of rail at that time?
About a foot. You know,
I
if you're
said
gonna
average. I didn't
That's
say-
a question that has been debated before.
the average length of the rail in the pile in Alexandria for the Manassas Gap is about the length of a flat car, which would be about 28 feet.
Makes sense.
And the pictures of the rail, and that is supported by the further pictures taken at Russell's photographs of rails being straightened in Alexandria from being heated up and bent over burning tiles. They appear to be about 28 feet long. Now, 28, 30, 26.
I think at one time people were talking about 29 foot, but you'd really need to see, and I can't at the moment think of a photo where I can see a flat car carrying rail during the Civil War that it would extend just a little out of each end of the flat car.
I'm looking at I kind of formed my opinion off that big pile of rail in Alexandria with the flat car.
No, I know what you're talking about, but I'm saying it would be neat to be able, if you could find a photo of a flat car with a load of rail, that would be a good way to determine what their length might be.
The Union Mills photograph of the flat cars with wheels on them. Was there rail on those?
I'd have to look back.
I know they had a ramp. The wrecking car, the flat car that went with the wrecking car had a crane, just a simple, stick up with a, and it had a ramp that was rail width that they would use to roll the wheels up onto cars. Because that's what they were recovering. The wood you'd rebuild, but you really wanted the wheels and the metal parts from the trucks. So they had a ramp, and there are shots of wheels being rolled up onto the flat cars. I'm trying to remember if any of the flat cars, if they were just rolling the wheels onto the car and kind of,
Well, I would assume that they would have rails on the flat car. The thing is that would they be iron rails or would they be wooden rails? Because they wouldn't have to have, they wouldn't have to actually hold any weight.
I'm just, they're picking up rail too. So, but if you look at I've got to go back and look at the scrapping to see, because I'm thinking I'm probably more going to, I don't think there's, Devereaux Station Y, the work train is all flat cars and they're loading dirt on it when they're digging out to put the Y in at Devereaux. With the picture of Halp, supposedly Halp standing there. Guy with the beard probably was Halp. I don't think Halp wore a uniform very often. Most of the shots where I know he's in, he's not wearing a uniform. Including the famous shot at Fredericksburg when he walked down the field and he said he realized all of a sudden he was looking at a wood pile and he realized that right in front of him was a bunch of Confederates. And he was wearing his civilian clothes, and they talked about the woodpile and turned around and walked back and said, glad I wasn't in uniform. So, yeah, I'm trying to think if there's I got to go back and look at that. I seem to recall a picture of a car with rails on it in Alexandria. Now sometime next week, I'll find it, if there is one, when I'm sitting in town.
Yeah, it's like looking for an old brochure. I'll probably find it in a week or two, Joel.
Yeah, it's one of those, I have a couple of thousand.
You know, the
people that-
kicker, Joel, as our coordinator, I sent him everything that I had. That when we used to do shows back here in the East. And I had flyers, Joel, when I was cleaning up my office and came across this stuff. But the flyers got thrown out because I haven't used these in about 6 years, you know, and I threw them all out. And I cannot for the life of me find the digital copy on my computer.
That's okay. I was typing one out. I'll finish it up tomorrow. It's no big deal. I'll probably, because I'll probably pull in some of the stuff off the display, which I do have in digital form. Bernie's layout and some of Al's work and some of Charlie's work down there. Sorry, Charlie, we're going to include you in the flyer. Okay, is that okay, Charlie?
Good. Yeah.
Okay. And I'll probably also put in our national convention is in October, and anybody who wants to join, just go to groups.io and join, and we'll send you the flyer and you get a hotel room, and we'll be glad to have you. So, if any of you happen to come by, I have a spare ticket to the Friday night banquet. So if you decide to swing into Dallas, I got a Friday night ticket to a banquet.
You're doing good work with that, Joel. Thank you much.
Okay.
Yes, thank you, Joel.
Oh, well, everybody's welcome, but I'm having fun. Trust me.
That's good.
Yeah. And everybody's going to get a chance to do a little work on. I want to redo our turnarounds, maybe while we're there, while we're at the convention, and because I want to have some turnarounds that could also wander off, into another operate off the circle, get out of the circle. So I want to add that trackage in, and I want to make it where I can make them wider or the current where they fit on one table, but a little bit wider so it could go on a bigger table.
About
Just
how big is the layout at the moment?
The layout at the moment is just 1 6-foot table. It's 2 3-foot sides and the end caps.
Okay.
And one very long siding that starts and goes all the way around to the other side of the table. So I can hide a lot of stuff on that in different scenes. And the scenes are all kind of a little bit different. I am perfectly willing for anybody who wants to make a module. I'll be glad to display it, put it into the layout, take it out if you want to do that. It doesn't matter what scale you work in. You just do a scene. I'll take care of the equipment. I've got more than enough for that. I have equipment for almost every Civil War railroad, including the Charleston and Savannah.
It looks like Tom Scott got us on for doing some modules at the convention this year.
That's what I was warning about. I will talk about it. It's going to be fun. It's a lot of, they're easy. But Kaido makes a kit that you can buy on their website for a T-track module. It comes with the track and the base scenery stuff. Okay, it $60. It has everything: wiring, track, all of that. The basic. They made it in conjunction with Woodland Scenics. It doesn't have your ground cover or your color. And I usually make a skyboard out of gator board, but I try to keep the skyboards in the same family of blues. It just sort of ties everything together. But those are, if anybody wants to do one of those, it's great. Our original ones are all single track, which is even simpler.
Yeah, I've actually came across the it's not really a module standard, but someone basically took the idea of Cato track and all that. You either have the curved or the straight pieces, and it has they're mini dioramas, and you all together.
Ours are to the T-track, to the T-track standard for in-scale.
Yes, this is I guess a different. I don't want to say different standard, but it's somebody that their idea was to make these little mini dioramas just to get people interested in model trains.
Yeah. Yes, I know what I've seen those. I said these are you're doing the these are to the
Yeah,
the inner.
all right, these are the T-track.
These up all over the country. Matter of fact, there's a huge T-track layout at the National Train Show. So
yeah.
Okay.
Well, it looks like people are starting to drop off like flies.
I know. Talk about
Yeah.
T-track all run.
It's about 9:30, so anybody got anything else? If not, I'll say good night to everyone and thanks for coming on.
Okay. Good night.
Yes. Thank you.
I know.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys. It's always a pleasure.
All right.
Thank you, Roger. I was thinking about that. It seemed about right time to wrap it up.
Yeah, it was kind of meandering on down that trail there.
I did
It went
enjoy.
fine.
I did enjoy the presentation. The only thing I have to suggest is that when we were looking at the photos originally, you were the one who noticed the building. And based on you noticing the one building that was still existing, then we began looking at the park. But it was you who looked at the building first.
Yeah, I know, but you also were the one who saw the electrical overhang.
Yeah, but
And how
that was after the building. That was
My
after the
friend,
building was
it's
sold.
called teamwork. We were there as a team, and that's what made that situation fantastic.
Time did go way too fast, didn't it?
I will remember that for a long time, DC. That was a lot of fun. It's too bad the results, but you know, we did find it. There's no
Yes,
doubt.
we did. We did. And it's the same thing. We did it the same way people are that we research photographs. You've done it from Manassas.
Yep.
The many photos and from being on the ground there and yeah. Excuse me.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well, let me let you go here.
I am going to need to say goodnight.
Yeah.
And it's good talking to you again, sir.
You too, sir. You have a
Okay.
good evening now. Okay.
You
Say
too.
hello to Donna for me. Okay.
And to Karen.
Yes, will do. I
And
will
to
do.
Daisy. And to okay.
Yeah, I know who you want to talk to. I remember. All right.
Okay.
Good night, DC.
Good night.